Hello and a big warm welcome to this presentation from the Urban Penguin. My name is Andrew Mallett and today we're going to take a look at securing our Ubuntu systems inside of AWS. Now we know hosting a machine in AWS is going to be available via SSH and everybody, yes everybody, is going to be trying to connect through to your system. Now we've looked at before how we can create solutions using command line utilities, but we're going to look today at how we can script a solution in Python to allow it to do the heavy lifting for us. To help our journey, our Pixel Playground is going to be made up of two Ubuntu systems that I've set up in AWS. This first system that I've connected to, I've named Bolt. It's here showing us the uncomplicated firewall, or UFW as it's known as in Ubuntu. The IP addresses, though, we don't want to have to go and add in because we've got to check our logs and be able to then go through and work out which IP addresses should be added in. Now, this system has only been up maybe 6 hours or so, but let's go through and check it with uptime. And of course, using the command uptime, it's going to show me how long the system has been up. And look at this, 5 hours and 21 seconds. And I've already got something like 8 IP addresses that have been banned. Now, there is software that automatically can ban some of these IP addresses, fail to ban, for example. But if you want to learn more about your own system, if you can get in and script the solutions yourselves, then you're certainly better placed to understand the security of your own system and being able to protect that system from people out there on the internet. Of course, I could manually check my journal log and look for bad activity, but if we take a look at running the script, so here I'm using sudo to elevate my privileges, run Python 3 and the dev.py script, we can see then the output that we're getting. It prints to the screen as well as writing through to UFW. The printing to the screen is just giving me information about IP addresses that it's found. Now looking at the output, we are getting some feedback from a module warning me that I've used sudo to raise my privileges. We don't want to see that. I can go through and send the output through to dev null, and we get then just the IP addresses coming through. Now, of course, there aren't too many at the moment. I could count them, but if we were getting more, if we wanted to count them, then of course we could just start doing this from the command line. So I counted it at 8 before. Have we still got 8? Well, let's go through and send it to our beautiful word count -l. And look at this. This is the 8 addresses. And this script is scheduled to run hourly. So it's automated and it just goes through and runs the script and then adds the entries through to UFW. I can run it many times. And UFW will just silently fail if it's trying to add an IP address to the deny list that is already there. So it's really convenient to be able to use. But obviously we need to get this up and running and get it up and running as a scripted solution so we can automate it pretty easily on any of our Ubuntu systems. Making a swift dash across to my other Ubuntu system, this has been up just 2 hours and 15 minutes, so a little bit less. But even so, in that time, it will have attracted some attention. So let's run journalctl and look for the -u, the systemd unit file of SSH, as it's called in Ubuntu. And we can go through and run a greppable search, just looking for failed. So this will be our failed password attempts. And we can see then there are many potential attacks happening on our system. So it's looking for failed password. And it's got failed password for invalid user or for root. Now, of course, we do need to take a little bit of care. If we had had a failed password for our own user account, our IP address might appear in this list. But as a basic test, this is a great starting point and something that we're going to be taking a look at how we script. Now let's go through and clear our screen with Control and L and look at how we can start creating our scripted solution to try and automate this problem of security and our firewall. Now, of course, you can use any text editor you want. I'm going to be using Vim, but you could also use a graphical IDE on your workstation and upload the code if you want. Especially if you're familiar with working with Python, an IDE is really good, but an ordinary text editor is good if you're learning Python because you get the muscle memory. So I'm going to create then a Python script called firewall.py. And to save you having to watch an awful lot of my typos, I'm going to paste in part of the code. Not the complete code, but part of the code, and we're going to adapt it as we go through. In this way, you don't have to look at my typing, and we can quickly understand what we're typing. I don't want to put in the whole script. I want us to be able to build the script up. So as we go through, we can start looking at these import lines. These are modules we're not going to be using at the moment. So I can comment out our regular expression engine. We don't need to be using this. And we won't be working with our firewall just yet. So you can see I've commented out those two lines. Moving up to the top, we've got our normal shebang, which is specifying the script interpreter. Now, we don't need to really worry with this because we can be running it with the Python command itself because we need to elevate our privileges to work both with the journal and the UFW later. But it's good documentation. Then we're going through to our systemd module. I don't have to worry about installing this module. It comes with the system. And we're importing from the module. Rather than working with the whole systemd module, we only need to work with the journal side of it. So you can see then that we're just bringing in our journal. Moving down to the j equals, this is creating a variable called j, which is an instant of our reader class from the journal. And of course, we'll be reading from our journal log. As we go down, we're using this boot method because we only need to look at our current boot. We're setting our log level, so info and higher that means. And then the important thing here is that we only need to look where the systemd service unit matches the SSH service. We've got an array set here. We won't be using it at the moment. Now, I could comment this line out, but I could easily leave it in as it's not going to cause any problems. A set is a special type of array that both sorts the elements, but also removes the duplicate elements. So this is going to be really useful for me because, of course, our IP addresses in the log are probably going to be listed more than once. So it saves me having to go through looking for unique occurrences. We can then go into our for loop. The for loop is the important heavy lifting here, where we read into a variable that we're calling entry every item that we find within our instance of our journal. We go through and populate a message variable with the entry message. So rather than pull out the whole line, we can just pull out the message portion of it. And then if the message starts with, and this is where an IDE can be really useful because I could go onto the properties of my message and be able to find out that it's got a method called starts with. And we're going to say starts with failed. So that will be my failed logins for invalid users, my failed logins for root or whoever. But we can then go through and print out our message variable. And we can check then that our script is doing what we need it to up until this point. So if we go through and save it, and I say we execute this through Python using sudo and Python because we need our elevated privileges, and then our firewall.py. And you can see now that we very quickly got down to just the messages that we want. So this is really useful for us. But of course, we actually want those IP addresses. Now, depending on the actual message is going to be dependent on the field, whether it's an invalid user or whether it's a proper username, but we just got the password wrong. But rather than having to work with a field number, we can search for just the IP address. And that's where our regular expression engine is going to come in. So if we go back into then our script, and I can go down or up in this case to the import RE, our regular expression module. which is going to give me the power to be able to work with regular expressions. And if you haven't worked with regular expressions before, I know you're going to absolutely hate them. However, they are really powerful. We're going to be populating the IP addresses set that we had looked at before. Remember, a set is a special type of array that organizes or sorts the array, but also removes those duplicate entries. So I can move down to my print message. We don't need this anymore. And we're going to go through into our IP addresses. So that's my set dot, and again, an IDE would help here. We could use tab completion to see what then works with a collection, but we can go through and put our update statement here. We want to update our set with each record that we read. So this is a method. So we open up our parentheses and then we go to our regular expression module and look at the find all. That's a method. So again, we open up our regular expressions. Now the R here comes before the string and is specifying that it's a raw string that we are looking at. So it's like everything is quoted properly in the string. The /b is a word boundary that we're looking for. When you think about it, the IP addresses are going to have spaces before them and after. So we know then that we've got our word boundary beginning. We're creating a group, but we're going to set a group property. We want the group here because we want to duplicate it. When we think about it, the properties of an IP address contain 3 blocks at the beginning. The properties that we're setting for our group, the question mark and colon, this then refers to the group. And it says then that we're only using this group at the beginning of our expression. We can then go through and do our /d for a digit. And when we think about an IP address, we have 1 to 3 digits. It could be 1.2 or it could be 12.2, etc. Followed by a dot. But a dot is a special meta character in a regular expression. So we have to then use \dot. So we take away the special regular expression meaning. We close off our group. We want 3 of these groups. So again, I can use the quantifier against the group. Quantifier just saying how many of them, and we want 3 blocks of this pattern. We don't actually want 4 because we don't have a dot following the 4th block. So I know we have 4 blocks of dotted decimals, but there is no dot after the 4th. For our 4th block, then again, it's going to be written the same, but just without the dot. So we want digit /d. We want a minimum of 1, a maximum of 3, so 1 to 3 digits, followed by, and then again our word boundary, the /b. Be careful with your /b's and your /d's there, don't get them mixed up. That's the end of our regular expression, so we can end off our quote. Ugly, isn't it? But believe me, this is really powerful. We can put our comma, and then we can go through and put our message is what we're searching for. And then we want 2 parentheses because we need to close the find all method and the update method. So there are actually 2 methods that we're closing. So make sure you've got 2 parentheses at the end. We can then shrink this back to see the rest of our code. But just be careful with the regular expression. They may be ugly, but they do a massive amount of work for us. So it is really worth persevering. Now we can go through and print out our IP addresses. So printing out our set. Now, once we're happy with this, we can go through and save our changes. And then we can test it again. So let's jump out and save this. And then we can up arrow key to execute the code again. And you can see now that we've got our set coming back with a list of IP addresses. And we can spend a little bit of time looking at those if we want, but there should be no duplicate IP addresses here. And we should then have a unique list of IP addresses. Of course, then we're not finished. We need to know what to do with these IP addresses. Ah, yes, what to do with those IP addresses? Well, of course, we need to pass them through to our firewall. Our firewall that we have by default on Ubuntu is the UFW, the uncomplicated firewall, but we need to check on its status and make sure that it's up and running. It's pretty straightforward. We can go through and use sudo and UFW status, and we can see that it's inactive. But rather than just jump in straight away and enable our firewall, we have to take a little bit of care, because by default, the firewall doesn't allow SSH. It doesn't allow any traffic through. So we can go through and do a sudo UFW allow 22, and you can see it's allowed it for both IP version 4 and IP version 6. With that done, we should be confident then that we can go through and enable our firewall. So just up arrow key and UFW enable. Do heed or pay attention to the warning, but we know we have enabled SSH through our firewall, so we're good to go. Now that's it from our firewall point of view. We are up and running, but we're allowing port 22 in, but obviously we want to deny it for those IP addresses that are in our journal. For that, we need to use another module. The modules that we've used so far, the systemd module and the regular expression RE module, have been packaged with Python. However, we don't have the module that we want to manage UFW. So we have to install it, and we would use the pip installer for that, our Python packaging. So if we go through and make sure that we've got that, by default we don't. So sudo apt install and pip. Hit the big enter key on this and we can allow it to go through, pull everything down that we need, and we'll then have our Python installer program ready to go. With that, we can go through just like we install normal software, but we go to our Python packages, our PyPy repositories, to look for additional modules. So we can allow this to run through. We can see we're 99% done. Hopefully we'll trigger across to 100% pretty soon. We're watching this in real time, so you get an idea that it's got a little bit of work to do, but it's looking like we're just about there. Now with the Python installer pip, we can install modules just for the user, but we need it for all of our users, especially for root. So we're going to do a sudo and pip install, and the module we want is pyufw. This should come down really quickly. With that installed, to say it's important that it's installed for the root user, we'll actually install it for all users if we use sudo. But we can go back now to our script and we can look at modifying a script, but there's not much work left to do now. We can look at our print IP addresses. Well, we don't need to print out our set anymore. So that last line we can get rid of. So let's go through and delete that last line. I'm just going to use uppercase A to move to the end of my current line where we're running our regular expression. But that's just going to make sure that I've got the correct indentation levels. So I can then start moving back because I want to put a new entry in. So we indent to the IP addresses. I can use Control D and Control D to move back. Just going to put a clear and empty line for readability. It's this extra white space that makes my script easy to read. And now we can go through and iterate through our IP addresses set. So for IP in, our IP underscore addresses. So we saw when we printed it out before, we had the brace brackets surrounding the set, and we had the commas in between. We just want the IP address. So we can then print out our IP address. Technically, we don't need to print it out, but that gives me a little bit of feedback, and I can use those IP addresses somewhere else if I want. But we go to our UFW module and then add in a rule to block each IP address. So we go through each IP address in the set one at a time and add a deny rule to block that IP address. Now add is a method, so we open up our parentheses and then we put our rule deny from and then a space. Now that's the end of our fixed string. We want to use plus so we can concatenate our fixed string with our variable, and we're using the IP variable from our loop. And then we're ready to close off the add function with our right parentheses. And then that is our code done and dusted. We just need to go up and uncomment our import. And we're importing the PyUFW module as UFW. Using the name UFW then relates to how we can use our UFW.add, keeping it similar to the command we would use from the command line. Saving our changes. It's getting exciting now. We're ready to go through and execute this. If we look at then running our firewall script again, we can see then all of the IP addresses now that have appeared in our log. These IP addresses that have been banned. But if we go back and run it again, and actually just sending our output through to dev null for our error output. Remember that error output we're not too bothered with. It's really just telling me that I'm running as root, but I'm in another user's home directory. We can see then the IP addresses, and if we go through now and count those, already then we've had 17 IP addresses trying to break into our system, either maliciously or accidentally. Now the nice thing is I can run this script as many times as I want, and it's not going to affect my firewall. It's only going to add new IP addresses. So as we go through and look at the status, even though we've run the script about 3 times now, we can actually go through and see that we have just the straightforward, unique list of IP addresses. And again, I can go back and run this again, and it's not going to go through and cause me any issues. So that means that I can create a cron job for this. So cron tab -e. I don't really care which editor I use, so I'm just taking the default. I can jump to the bottom of my cron tab and I can schedule this to happen on a regular basis. If I want it to run hourly, I put in, say, 0 to run on the hour. For every hour, for every day of the month, for every month, for every day of the week. So I've got 5 columns that I'm populating there. Then our command is the 6th column. And we want to run sudo python 3 and then the full path through to the script I want to run. So in my case, /home/tux and then firewall.py. Obviously the name of the script in whichever user's home directory you created it. My user happened to be the tux user. Once we're happy with that entry, we can go through and save our script. So running Ctrl+X, yes to save, right through to the cron tab, and then we are good to go. But as I say, we are happy for this to run on a regular basis because I can run the script many times and it's not going to affect the firewall, only adding in the new IP addresses that appear in my log. So it doesn't matter how often I run this. I say I'm running this hourly, but if we wanted a shorter interval, we could easily then go through and set that through to something like 30 minutes or 15 minutes. But you can see it doesn't matter how often I run the script, my firewall then remains consistent with just the IP addresses and not duplicate addresses that I've added in.
All that is left to say is thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, then you are probably sadder than I first thought. For more of this drivel, please subscribe, like and comment to @TheUrbanPenguin.